Hi there, friend. How are you?
Amy, when people together.
Where did they go? He don't ever bite. No, it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, not coming back till tomorrow. She's not coming back till tomorrow. You can just.
Hey y'all, I don't have any songs picked up, so help me pick out some songs to sing. Brownie, ignore everything I say to you when I say your name.
How about you've got a plate?
What page?
4 in the green.
Green,
4 in the green.
green.
You got a place at the welcome table.
You got a place at the welcome table someday. Hallelujah. You got a place at the welcome table. You got a place at the welcome table someday. We're gonna feast on milk and honey. We're gonna feast on milk and honey someday. Hallelujah. We're gonna feast on milk and honey. We'll give thanks at the welcome table. Thanks at the welcome table some of these days. We'll come home to the welcome table. We'll come home to the welcome table these days. Hallelujah. We'll come home to the welcome table. Home to the welcome table some of these days.
So we're just kind of doing song requests in the green and the purple. And I'm gonna, if there are chords, I'll try to play along. No promise.
Slowly.
Yeah. One where we can just like pause each time the chords change.
Kind of like progression that he saved of
Well,
as he went learning.
yeah, I just kind of have to flip through and find songs that have like his chords notated. Like, but I would go ahead and read number 125 in the worship resources.
And in the green?
In the purple. 125 in the purple. We'll just say this prayer together. It's the Advent prayer. God of Advent, in the darkest days and nights of the year, our hearts turn toward your promised light. With the first faint glimmer of a single candle, dancing into the light of many bright flames, our hope is ignited once more. In these Advent days, lead us to light, to a manger where the face of God shines bright and clear. How about number 63 in the purple?
63.
63.
Harry, sing 54 in the green.
54 in the green.
Christ be our light, or longing for light.
Oh, yeah. 54 in the green. I know some of these chords, so I'll try. Buddy, buddy. You are here and I'm here. It's all
And
you.
we're all here.
No, there's one person.
No.
Oh, Brown Club.
No.
Brown,
So I'm gonna go. Something like that.
One of my favorite is 39 in the purple. Will you come and follow me? I really like that. It doesn't have that many chords in it, does it, Terry? It's only one over half inch.
There you go, Barry. Only one every half. There you go.
I like that attitude. Never mind what kind.
It sounds like a weird one. Because Aaron simplified it here.
Think I ever played a G minor or B flat.
All right, I'm gonna play the Aaron simplified version. It capos it up, so. Will you come and follow me? Sorry, that was just practice.
Got it.
This one's tricky to the B minor. Here we go. Will you come and follow to be
That is a good.
That is.
I think I'm inclined to go ahead and do the offering here as much as I can.
God, I'm bang. He's awesome. Thank you. Have another music player.
You did really well.
So
You did really well.
the offering, this is for the church, this is for MCC. I'm sorry, did anybody else want to pass it around? No.
Where do you get change at? Never seen change. I thought they didn't use that anymore.
Oh.
They've substituted for a card now. You just hand them a card and that's it. I'll show you one. It's plastic. Got your name on it.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for the resources that you provide for us, for the relationships that we have, for the work that we have, resources, yeah, that you've brought into our beings through relationship, through spirit, through, yeah, who knows why. But we ask that you help us as we try to be good stewards of the things that you've given us, and we try to share things that you've given us. Help us to use the funds that are collected with the church to aid in the coming kingdom and hopefully raise the valleys, lower the mountains. Jamie is going to preach for us today. Is this your Jamie?
Yes, it is mine.
Right there where it's at. And I might reposition the camera so they can see your face and
So we can hear you.
Yeah, so you can hear me and so that you can see
Yeah.
the chart, because I'm gonna do a couple things on the flip chart today too. And I'll try and write nice and big, so.
My computer got stolen while I was in Hot Springs, and so I'm having to use my phone. It's harder to hear.
Okay.
If
Sorry.
it's got
I
stolen,
can hear you right now.
All right, and I'll try and speak louder, you know.
Okay.
Never really turn on my teacher voice until I absolutely have to. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I have a trauma there or what, but
I hear you fine right now. Thank you.
I hear you.
good. Um, well, I am just excited to share with you all this morning. When was it that we had that delegation in summertime with boys? Was it in June? No, it was before May. No, I don't think it was that late, because that's when they had that training that I didn't go to. So I want to say it was like in like May or something. But anyways, on one of my prior sharings with you all, I had talked about being in the hospital, and anyways, after that, I think Terry had invited me. We're going to be having a voice delegation. Come and join us, and I think that was about in May. And so I went to that delegation. What church was that at?
Unitarian.
The Unitarian Church, and that was when Elizabeth Valdez came and shared a training with us on broad-based organizing, and I just really enjoyed that training. She did a wonderful job, and brought in, I want to say that I feel like a lot of the training that she shared was not new to me, but the theological aspects that she entered in, also in terms of theological foundations, were not new, but the resources that she brought in were new for me, like where they came from, you know, more from like Catholic resources, just other spiritual places that I hadn't pulled from. I've gotten a lot of mine from, like, since I went to Mennonite Brethren College out in California, a lot of my peacemaking studies, you know, comes from that. And so when I went and did my graduate studies overseas, then it got secular, and so then everything had like a secular base to it, which I really appreciated as well. So then when Elizabeth brought that in, it just was really enriching. I found it really enriching. And I thought, gosh, I really would like to get more of this training. And she talked about the upcoming training that they were going to have in, I think in July. I didn't go to that, the 5-day training, and I thought, well, I'll get another opportunity because they do them twice a year. And sure enough, I got the opportunity here recently to go to their training. And so that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. And it's mostly going to be a talk about power. And I'm going to unpack one small word in scripture with you today. But before I unpack that one word, and it's not power, we're not going to unpack power, but a word closely related to power, and from a scripture verse that we have already talked about in Matthew. But before we do that, I want to share an exercise that we did in the training that was really fun for us. We did a lot of reading. And the reading was done before we even went to the training. So this was a 5-day training. It was intensive. And I'm not going to try and give you everything that we did in those 5 days, but I'm going to try to give you like half of what we did. And I actually think I can do that. And I want to give you the highlights of it. And I hope that in another follow-up sermon, I can give you the other part of it that I would like to share with you. And no one put me up to this, by the way. I put myself up to this. I just thought this would be something really cool for us as Joy to just kind of wrestle with. And there were things that really impacted me, and I feel like are just things that we can have fun diving into. So they gave us a lot of readings on leadership and on power and on organizing, and they gave us this one, for me, really obscure reading, really old reading on Athens. And I'm like, oh God, you know, and it was like 6 pages, and which doesn't seem like a lot, but it was this dialogue between these islanders from the island of Milos and the Athenians.
Recording in progress.
And so I'm not going to do really great. This is Jamie's history lesson. So this is why I didn't do social studies. I did Spanish. That was my area. But so the history is kind of that Athens has become a great sea power, and they are ruling the islands at the time. And Sparta is a great, you know, in terms of the mainland, is a great power, and Milos is just this one little island. And I just kind of, Athens is all of these islands here, and Milos is this one little island, and then Sparta has the mainland. And Milos is one of these remaining, it might not be the only remaining, but it's one of the few remaining islands yet to be conquered by Athens. And so Athens has come in, and they are not fighting their way in, but they've come in armed, and they've come into dialogue with Milos. And so so we've been given this dialogue to read. And I'm like, okay, it's not like an old English or anything, but I'm sitting there and I'm reading through it and I'm just like, trying to follow the logic of the two. And I'm really wondering, why are they giving us this thing, And so, but there's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason. And I'm thinking, we're supposed to be learning about organizing, and it's just these two powers. One that's grossly, in power, and the other just has nothing. Has nothing to offer the other. And so we've all read, and although, at the beginning, some of us, we're all working people, right? We're all mostly full-time working people. Some of us are full-time students. Some of us are full-time students and working people at the same time, right? And so we're all busy people. And so some of us, did you do all the readings? Did you do all the readings? Well, I still got a few more to go. I'm planning on reading them at nighttime. Let's just ask them to let us know each day which readings we're going to be talking about that day, so that we can read them the night before. Which was going to be interesting, because every night we were expected to be doing these socials, and the socials it's like a work event. It's like networking every night. So it's like you're going from 8 o'clock, you go to breakfast, at 9 o'clock the sessions start, and you finish at 6 o'clock, you have dinner, and then at 7 o'clock you're going to a social event, and then that ends at 8 o'clock, and then it's just, you're all day long, you're in events, right? And so there's not really any downtime, and if you're like me, that you go to bed when the chickens go to bed, like, there's really not tons of downtime. So anyway, so this was the first, but Elizabeth was kind enough. Elizabeth showed up at the last. We had a delegates assembly right before this, right? And so she was kind enough to tell me, read the Malayan dialogue is the first thing you're going to talk about when you get there. So I was like, okay, this is important. And I'm like, really, Elizabeth? This, of all the readings, this is the thing that's the most important. Okay, so we get there, and they asked for they divided us into two groups of people. There's about 40 of us there. So they divided us into groups of 20. And of this group of 20, they pulled 8 of us out, and they said, we're going to have you act it out. Act it out. Oh my gosh. So there's 4 of us on one side and 4 on the other side. Now, depending on our energies this morning, we could act it out, or I could just tell you guys what we did. What do you want us to do?
We're listening.
We're listening. Well, I'll tell you the main idea of the dialogue that happens between the two of them. Okay. So the dialogue that happens is, first of all, Athens comes in and says to the Malayans, I think is how you pronounce it. First of all, they say, we see that you have not convoked all of the people as we asked you to. We see that only your representative body is here, as you must be fearing that were we to speak to all of the people, they would hear the voice of reason and they would agree with us. That's the first thing that they start off with, right? And so, but anyways, here we are. And the Malayans say, well, we see that you've come with all your weapons, and you come here, saying that you want dialogue, but you're also fully armed. So what can we say to you who are here with all this power, right? And the Athenians say, well, we're here to dialogue. So are we going to dialogue, or are you just going to keep complaining about the circumstances, And we are wanting to dialogue. Again, we said we're here to dialogue. And are you just going to keep interjecting every time you have an issue? Or are we going to be able to set an agenda? Are we going to be able to speak out our arguments and finish our arguments? Or are you going to interject every time you have an issue? And so the Malayans once again say, well, boo-hoo, you're the ones with all the weapons, and it's not fair, but since that's what you're suggesting, okay, fine. We'll do it as you say. You set the ground rules. We'll let you speak out your arguments, and then we'll give ours, right? And so they begin, and they say, you know, you're wanting to. I mean, in the end, you're just wanting to make slaves of us. So that's what's happening here. And all through the dialogue, not once do the Athenians mention that their intentions are to make the Malayans their slaves. They never mention that. But 2 or 3 times in the dialogue, the Malayans mention, you know, this is your end goal is just to make us your slaves. You're just intending on making us your slaves. The other things that come up is that the Malayans say, well, you know, here we are, but you know, we're gonna fight until the end. We're not. Well, the first thing that they say is, can't we just stay neutral? Can't we just, you know, can't we just be a neutral party in this whole thing that's playing out among everybody here? Because we were happy on our little island here, just doing our thing, and can't we just stay neutral? And the Athenians say, no, you can't stay neutral because that would make us look really weak. And we don't want to look weak to our subjects. If we looked weak to our subjects, they'd all start rising up against us. And so, no, that's not an option for you. So let's talk seriously here. That's not serious talk. And we're not going to spend time on high arguments. We're not going to spend time on flowery arguments here. We're not going to talk about justice. We're not going to talk about, you know, things like honor. Like, why talk about those things? Let's talk about interest. Let's talk about self-interest. And our self-interest is, we don't want to waste time and energy on bringing you into our empire. And you don't want to lose lives. So we want to keep you alive so that we can benefit from you. And you're going to benefit by staying alive. So what do you want to offer to us? Like, what's going to be your thing? And the Malayans can never get past the fact that they think that they're going to be made slaves. So they keep saying things like, well, can't we just go by fair play? Can't we go by justice? Well, our honor says we have to defend our people. And well, for courage's sake, we're going to stand up for ourselves. Well, we're going to hold out for hope. And hope means that, you know, at least at some point at the very end, and then at some point they say, well, the Spartans are our brothers and they're our kinsmen. And at some point they're going to come and rescue us. We just know it's going to happen. And the Athenians are like, wouldn't that be nice? That would sure be nice if they came to rescue you. And they're like, aren't you afraid that your other people will hear about, you know, like aren't you afraid of the mainlanders, that they're going to come and get you? And they're like, no, we're not too worried about the mainlanders. That'll come when it comes, and it's not happening right now, so no, we're not worried about that. Well, aren't you afraid that your subjects are going to rise up against you? If they do, they do. What's happening right now is that we're coming to get you. That's what's happening right now, you know. And they're like, well, the gods are in our favor, and law is in our favor. And like, well, we pretty much figure the gods are on our side too. Like, I think it's pretty much evenly handed, and if it were about law, like, you know, I mean, like in the end they could just kind of like shut down everything they had to say. And finally the Malayans say, no, we are going to hold out for hope in the end, and we're going to do this thing. And so the Athenians leave, and they say, well, you know, this is a really bad choice of yours. You're going to really regret this. And they come back later, and but when they come back later, they come back to fight. The Malayans wind up standing up against them. They lay a siege all the way around them. They starve them out. They fight more, and then what they end up doing is killing all of their males, and then selling all of the women and children into slavery. Okay, so that's the scenario. So now, do you want to act it out, or do you want me to tell you what we did? Tell us. Jesus, I'm not in the mood today. So what we did is, I'll tell you what the situation was. We had 4 people on each side, and he said, okay, the only rule is I get to interrupt you. So what do you think we did when he asked us to present the scenario of what we read? What do you think we did?
You were acting out this sketch with 4 people, Athens.
4 people for Athens and 4 people for the Malayans. So what do you think we did?
So the only rule was he get to interrupt each other?
No, the only rule was that he could interrupt us. I know there's not much to it. He didn't give us any other guidelines.
You had, I've done this before, and we had idealistic Malayans
Mhm.
who were like, yeah, give me liberty or give me death.
Yes, yes, yes. And so they died.
Yeah.
Yes, so did we. On the first round, we died. Did you get a second round?
I don't.
Okay. Did you do this for a political science class?
No, it was a voice training.
Oh, it was a voice training. Okay, okay.
I don't remember.
Uh-huh. So on our first round, we died, and then we did it again. He switched, so we were there. But now we didn't act it out like, with swords and stuff.
Yeah.
Like we just did the dialogue, and we were like, man, we were kind of nervous. We were like, we gotta show them that we really read this thing. I mean, we line for line, we had it out. We had all the words, all the dialogue. And then he's like, okay, now you guys are the Malayans, and you're the Athenians, and we're like, God, we already said every single line. We have to do it all over again. And we did it all over again. So we died a second time. So then we got picked up and removed, and a second group came in to do it. And the second group that came in to do it tried something different. What would you guys have done? What would you guys have done?
Change the ground rules. They established the ground rules. They
Okay.
shouldn't have been able to establish the ground rules.
Okay, so what would you have done? How would you have changed the ground rules?
I don't know, maybe you come with weapons too?
Okay,
Maybe the Malayans come with weapons as well, since they know the Athenians are coming with weapons.
you do want to remember though that they're grossly outnumbered. So
that's a good
weapons with
point.
weapons is not really going to make much of a difference. One of the things he did on the second group was so they tried doing the same thing at first, or not on the second group, but on us when we switched
Mhm.
sides, is he said, okay, now the Spartans were coming with a boat, right? So all of a sudden we believed we were finally getting this backup, right? And so it changed our attitude, and we got a lot more confident, right?
Mhm.
But all it did was get us more demanding and more like uppity, and we got more entrenched in our position, just more entrenched. We didn't get more collaborative, we didn't get more creative, we didn't get more anything. We just got, and then he changed the scenario a little bit more and was like, nope, now there's more Athenians coming. And so but I like your idea about changing the ground rules. Maybe a different way to change the ground rules.
I mean, I would like, after years of reflecting on it, yeah. What do the Malayans have to offer to the Athenians?
Okay.
The best scenario. I mean, in the worst scenario, yeah, we're gonna battle to the death. So what kind of lemonade can we make from these lemons?
Yeah.
And then hope out, for a long-term, protracted
quasi, loyalty, like, to the Athenians. Like, let's go with their plan, knowing that, we're not long-term loyal Athenians, but the writing on the wall is, we have no choice. And so we can at least kind of act like we're on their side and
Sure.
give them the things that they require. We maintain our lives and live to fight another day.
Right. Yeah. Our second group did something different, and I wasn't especially impressed with them. I wasn't wowed with them because they had already done the thing too, and they had learned the lesson already from their other groups. So it's not like it was a creative thing that had come from their own minds, but I'll tell you what they did. And I'll tell you what I did and what bothered me, because I had seen this kind of exercise before, but in a totally different, non-Malayan, I didn't have to go through the 6 pages to learn this lesson thing, in a different dynamic where we were given long rolls of newspaper that were real long, and you were like in a group of 6 people, and you were told to go use them, and you weren't told how you're supposed to use them, right? And then so everyone goes and they beat up on each other with the rolls of, but we would let's form a circle around each other and sing and dance and all that. It's like, what do you do with it when you're not given rules, right? Like, or make your own rules, or does it have to always be that you're working against each other? Can you work with each other type thing, right? And so I was sitting there with my group, but I was so timid. And they start, it's the second time around, and we're yelling at each other, and we're trying to show that we know the script. And like, I poked the person real lightly. I poked the person next to me. I'm like, let's do something different. This is old. Let's just find out something. Why don't we negotiate with them? But I just did it really quietly, and they just kept going, And so I was frustrated with myself that I didn't push for more, like, why did I have to go with the script? Why didn't we just break the script, right? And so what the other group did was they said, no, we're not going to talk to you right now because we're not ready to talk to you right now. We're going to go and we're going to caucus. And so they got up and they went over into the corner. And so this group said, well, fine, it's 2. And so they sat in their corners and they talked about, what do we have? What can we exchange? What can we give them? Well, we have 5 cows and we have, this much land, and we have da 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 da. And so they went back and they talked about what they could exchange, what they were willing to give and what they weren't willing to give, and they wound up with sort of negotiation, and they were willing, they kept their lives, they kept their children's lives. Another piece of information that was really key, by the way, people on the computer, are you still able to hear me fine? Karen, is my volume okay?
I hear you.
Okay, good. Is that they mentioned that the Athenians didn't usually send their own sons to battle. They usually would use the people that they enslaved or subjected. They had a group of those people that would go in battle for them. So they're not losing their own in battle. They're not, and so it's like the Malayans are risking losing their own children, right? Their own sons. That it's not a fair, talking about fair play. It's not set up. And so that's why, and the Athenians say something really key. It's those in power who basically set the agenda. It's those in power who decide the rules, and we're the ones who are in power right now. So, and we're offering the dialogue. And just the fact that they're offering the dialogue is huge, right? Like, let's make an exchange. What do you want to give us? They didn't come in and say, you're going to give us this, 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 and this. So anyways, this is an exercise apparently that's used a lot in political science classes as a sort of way to look at what it means to dialogue, what it means to follow a script. And the idea is to learn to break the script and not do what the Malayan did, to think more like an Athenian and not like a Malayan. So I wrestle with the idea of thinking like an Athenian, but I do like the idea of breaking the script. I do like the idea of breaking the script, and I do like the idea of the caucus, because the caucus is a way to build power. It's a way not just to buy time, but it's a way to, when you are unified, you can have more power because you know what you want. You're coming in together. You've had time to get creative, and you're not distracted by all of these, voices, just the all of the noise, you know what I'm saying? And so you're not afraid, you're not coming in being intimidated. So setting the agenda is having the power, right? So if you can set the ground rules, and there were lots of examples when I went into this training. There was one gentleman who shared how he was able to, with his local organization, like just different examples where the city had things that they wanted to do, but they didn't have the time or the energy to like lay out a game plan for it. And so his local organization, kind of like our voice, had already gone in and basically designed a whole thing for it. And the city was like, wow, like you've basically done that work for us. Okay, you can, since you've already set it out, you can do it. So like they had it planned, they were impressed, they got to do it, because they set it out already. So anyways, that to me kind of gives an example of one way to do power. I wanted to read a quote from no, I'm not gonna read that quote yet. I'm gonna read the scripture first, which is from Matthew 5:5. You guys remember this from when I was preaching and sharing about Palestine. This is Matthew 5:5. I don't really have to read it from the online because I can just share it with you guys. We looked at different translations, but it was, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." Or we talked about the alternative translation, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit this land," right? Maybe another alternative translation could be, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit this earth," because the demonstrative is there, this. You know that for certain, right? The question I want to, instead of focusing on earth or land today, the question I want to ask is, what does meek mean? And that is the word that I want to dive into today. And it might seem strange, considering that we've been talking about power. Why would I choose meek as a word? It might seem like it's the opposite of power. What do you think of when you think of the word meek?
Well, meekness is power under strength, I guess, but also you could exchange meekness for gentleness or humility.
Okay, good. Anybody else?
I have heard somebody teach that it's a picture of a wild horse under control.
Okay,
I mean, there's a lot of power there, but it's under control.
Yeah.
I have a feeling or thought that it's like an antonym to brashness.
Okay.
So it's not like necessarily or being a pushover, but it's not being brash, not being reckless.
I'm just going to repeat that so they can hear you on the computer. Remind me your name?
Alex.
Alex. So Alex said it's like an antonym to brash. So not necessarily weak or pushover, but I like everything that you guys are saying. What I had found, there's, you know, you can find all of these different sermons on meek that talk about this idea of the gentle and the submissive, and what Derek said. You said, what was the first definition you gave, Derek?
I think it's like you have strength, power, but it's been tamed basically, like
Under control.
Jeannie was saying. It's taken care of under strength.
Okay.
Strength under this discipline.
Okay, so Aristotle, so I'm not gonna go with all the sermons. I'm gonna go with kind of a secular, but it comes from, you know, still the Greek word praus. And so Aristotle said that a praus person is one that has the virtue of the mean or the average between two extremes. So it's the extreme between reckless and cowardice. It's right in the middle. Okay, it's knowing, it's steady courage. Okay, so it's knowing when to be, it's having that power and that courage, and knowing when to stand up in the right moment with the right people, right? It's not just popping off all the time. So there's a wisdom in it, there's a strength in it, there's a discernment in it, patience. There's a patience in it. There's a whole lot of virtue to it. So what I pulled was kind of 5 lessons of what a praus. Oh, and so what I really liked, you mentioned the wild horse, right? What he talked about is that in ancient Greece, they trained war horses, and a war horse needed to be praus. So not necessarily a wild horse, but a well-trained war horse. Because a war horse, unlike a wild horse, it would have the strength of a wild horse, but a praus horse would be trained enough where they would not be, what do you call that when you're like skittish, you know? It wouldn't be skittish, it wouldn't be startled by the arrows, by the clashing of the shields and the armor, and by the fire and the bright, you know, lights or anything, or loud sounds and the yelling, but it would be courageous, it would go through the fight, right? And it would stand up to everything, and you know, even pain or whatever, and it would fight through. That's a praus horse, but it would be sensitive to its rider's touch, and would be led and submissive to that touch, right? So that's a praus war horse. So one of the people that I was reading was talking about being a leader, being meek, being a meek leader, like a praus war horse. And so
Jamie, it sounds like you're saying that you need to be teachable, strong yet teachable.
yes, so our common, you know, unfortunately, when we think of meek in English, we often think of powerless, or a pushover or whatever, you know, or just submissive in the sense of, you know, you just take it, you know, whatever people tell you to do. But that's different, you know. Like Karen says, there's nothing wrong with being teachable. what Derek said, strength under control is a very good definition for meek. And so I put 5 things up here. I put admitting to your limitations. And in that sense, I mean, we all have limitations, and that's okay. That's just part of life. And it's okay to recognize what your limitations are and to know I have this much time, I have this much money, I have this much energy. These are the things I'm able to do. And at this point, I need to ask someone else for help or someone else to do this, right? And so that would be a strong, meek leader. Deferring to others. You know, when you know that someone else has greater expertise in an area, a wise leader would say, hey, I know that you do this better, so I'm going to take your word for this, right? I'm going to ask for your advice on this. A meek leader would submit to authority, the right kind of authority.
You know, in organizational behavior, we talk about power, authority, and influence. And this also could lead to leadership. So meekness could be interchanged with many of those things.
Mm-hmm. Sure. A meek leader would accept circumstances. So this is a little bit different than admitting to limitations. Limitations is more about yourself, the certain limitations that you have, and circumstances is about what's going on around you, what's happening, and just accepting certain things that are happening. That's part of the circumstances, and that's okay. And not trying to make impossible things happen. And then number 5 is doing what's needed, and not, when I say that, it's, you know, sometimes there are things you don't want to do, but you have to do them. There's that call that you have to make that you don't want to make, but you've got to do it, you know. And I can think of a couple things that I'm involved in right now where there are things that maybe I don't want to do them, but it's, you know, there's something that needs to be done, and it'd be better to do it. It'll actually make it easier for everybody involved in the end. And that would just be better leadership, you know. So that's just kind of an overall of meek. And I really liked this because they, you know, I'm flipping back and forth through my book because I wrote in order of the days that we did things, but when I was putting together my sermon, I put it together in an order that made sense for me, and tying things together in a way that would work for us. And what this struck me was a quote with Martin Luther King Jr., and I paraphrased it, but he said that power is love implementing justice. Power is love implementing justice. And I think that when you're talking about meekness, so I think God is love, right? And God is all powerful, and God is justice too, right? And so God can do all these things, right? I can't do all things, but in my meekness, I can look for the ways in which I can implement, you know, I implement the things that I can implement. You know, you talk about things that are winnable, things that are actionable, things that are, and Voice talks about that a lot, how to turn something from a problem to an issue, right? And we want to make it an actionable item, something that you can work on, that you can actually make winnable. So I want to build power in an institution. We want to build power inside of joy, for example.
How about acknowledging boundaries too?
Sure, that's a big part of that too. I would say that's a big part of that. And so it just makes me think of that, you know, when I talk about building power, I think that meekness is connected to that. That courage to know when to stand up, you know, who to stand up with and how to stand up, you know. So I wanted to offer that to you guys. Now, Aaron talked with us, has shared with us about Ella Baker before. You guys remember who Ella Baker is? Dun, 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 dun. If Aaron's on the call and he can hear me and he wants to remind us about Ella Baker, he can. Otherwise, if someone else here
I
remembers.
assume you're gonna go with more than a hamburger.
I didn't know there was a hamburger named after Ella Baker.
It's just a speech she gave.
Okay, no. I have a little quote. I did a little quote, or I tried to paraphrase a quote from her that I really like. But can you remind us about her?
That was the main thing I remember, is that she was very much behind the scenes in the 50s and 60s. She had the ear of King and others, very, very instrumental in the organizing procedures of the civil rights movement.
Yes. And she helped organize SNCC. Here's something, it's close to what she said. If I totally botch it, if this sounds like something she said, let me know. It's oppressed people have the ability to interpret the world around them and to move to transform it. Oppressed people have the ability to interpret the world around them and to move to transform it. That's really empowering. Now, one of the people that was helping us, who was facilitating the time that we were together, doesn't like the word empowering, but I'm going to stick with that word because I know it and it's helpful to me. So I find that to be a very empowering phrase. They have the ability to interpret the world around them and to move to transform it. And I think that if we were to take that and how can oppressed people move to transform? How do they have the power to move to transform the world if by definition they're oppressed? I think if you look at power paradigms, we'd be able to understand that a little bit better. And if we're going to look to be meek, we can understand that a little bit better. So I want to show you a power paradigm, and it's really simplified. And I'm going to add an element to it that the same person that was talking about, Khaled Hudson is his name. I really enjoyed him as a facilitator, and he's a lead organizer in the Los Angeles area, although he's also been with Industrial Areas Foundation in Louisiana and other places. But we kind of really argued on this point. So here's his power paradigm, and he said, there's basically two kinds of power. There's power over. Anybody want to guess what the other kind of power is?
Power with.
Power with. What would be some things that would describe power over? Just like one word things. Adjectives.
Dictator.
Controlling.
Okay, controlling.
Repression.
Willingness and ability.
Say that again, Derek.
Willingness and ability.
For power over?
Yes, if you have the power, you have to be able to have the power and then willing to assert it.
Okay, but I don't think that would describe power over.
Okay.
Violence. Violence is another thing that goes with power over. It's violent.
Violence against, is that what you're?
Yeah.
Karen,
like-
Karen said dictator.
Oh, yes. Thank you, dictator. Ability is just in general, Derek, is really good because in Spanish, we talked about this, power, the word power in Spanish, it literally means to be able to.
Right. Right.
Right? So that's a good connection there. Now power with, what would be some good adjectives?
Cooperative.
Cooperative. I'm going to add to that relational. Because co-op, relational.
Persuasion.
Okay. Persuasive.
Negotiable.
Negotiable.
It's like compromise, but that's what I was really.
Patient. Patient. Okay, those are good words. I'm going to add maybe to each list. Let's see. In power over, you're focused on judgment and opinion. And in power with, you're focused more on story and discernment.
I don't know how to say this in like an adjective, but you're also focused on maintaining the power when it's power over.
Okay.
Like, and so doing what you have to maintain power versus
Continuing.
share.
Continuing your power.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
How about overcome?
Overcome. Okay.
Overcome. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good word, Derek. I don't know where I would put it in this particular paradigm. But I like that word. I had a third kind of power that I really wanted to put in here, and I am going to put it in here because this is my paradigm. I talked about power 4. I'm going to put it right here. And my facilitator was like, "Oh, that's just another kind of power over." and I said in my studies in South America, the studies that I did, they identified 3 types of power. And this power 4 was not necessarily, it was what I read in Spanish. So it might have a different feeling to it than talking about it in English. But in Spanish, you have por y para. And so they're different, but they're both translated for. But they have a different.
Para is in order to.
Right. And so it's like for the purpose of a certain thing. So, sometimes you're doing something for the purpose of getting something, having something later on in the future in the relationship. So let's say right now the relationship is not quite there, but in the future you want it to be there. And so you're doing something in order that in the future there might, so you're like sewing into that relationship. So you can't, and I didn't have the words to say it, and the training was moving quickly, and I wanted to say, we're sewing into something right now. We're building into it. We're doing something for that person, but it's not, and I was thinking of like armed actors, like where it's not possible right now that you can just go up and do something with that person right now. It's just not going to happen. It's not real. That's not real. And so I wanted to say that this was too simplistic. It's not real that all the time you're either this or you're that. So I do think there is this middle space, but that's just my humble
I
opinion.
would put love on the right
Okay.
side. That there's a certain naivete to that, but I believe in it.
Yes, and I'm gonna circle it because we did a lot with that, and we we moved it from that spot. We put it somewhere else, and maybe we can do that in my follow-up sermon.
The reason I think it has to do with power, you know, we've learned so many things about what we call love.
Yes.
Definitions of it, examples of it that we can reflect on. But where I would connect it with power is, I believe, a statement in the scriptures that says love never fails.
Yeah.
Just keep exercising it. At some point it won't fail.
Yeah. And I think of, and then I'll get to your point, and I always think of Martin Luther King when he talks about love force. Like, I think of power and I think of love together as well. Like, you can't have true power, has to be loving, otherwise it just becomes.
I was gonna say for power with servant leader.
Servant leader. Good. Okay. Servant leader. Great. So we've got some good descriptors on that side. Now, in addition to these two kinds of power, there are two other kinds of power that, I mean, could be under either one of these, but we're going to stick to this side of power with, and that's two kinds of power that we organize. We can organize money and we can organize people. Okay? And so, just for the purpose of time,
What are the two?
people and money. And
Okay.
it's 12 o'clock. So I'm going to stop right there because it's 12. And I thought I would have more time, and that's just that. And so we're going to stop there, but next time I will share with you guys a little bit more about how we organize people. I'm not going to get into organizing money because we didn't get very far into that in the training. And I feel like that's my weakest part. And so I'm hoping to learn more about that in January. There is a training that is going to be coming up, in fact, on organizing money. And I'm hoping to hear more from Sandra about that. But I'm actually on the Finance and Growth Committee. This is a big area for me of growth. If I haven't mentioned this already, I was trying to run from this committee. I was trying to do anything but be on this committee, but Sandra said, if you really want to grow as an organizer, get on because these are the two areas that you organize, money and people. And so if you feel like this is your weakest spot, then this is probably the spot where you need to be on. So I sit on there and I say, I feel like I have nothing to contribute to this, but there's going to be a training where it's just going to be a simple thing like how to role play if you are sitting in front of a potential donor or somebody that can be giving money towards your organization. What would you say to them? You know, how would you propose what you're going to ask them for? And so there's going to be a training like that in January sometime. So I will keep you guys apprised of that. And I look forward to following up on this conversation of meekness and power with you. So, ta-da! But let's have comments. Let's hear back from people.
How about oppression?
Oppression, yes. You said oppression, overcome. I feel like your words are more in relation to what happens with power. And that's really important. And those words make me think of why we talk about actions. And that is something that I will be sharing with us in the follow-up sermon, getting to what is the action cycle, because the purpose of building power is so that you can, on the one hand, you can identify what are the interests in the institution. We are an institution. Joy Mennonite Church is an institution that is one of the institutions that makes up, for example, the organization of Voice. And as we identify our self-interests, right, as the Athenians were asking, what are your self-interests? You make up an idea of what actions you want to act on that are winnable so that you can overcome oppressions. So that kind of goes with what Derek is talking about.
Somewhere in here, it seems like if you are just wanting power over people, you're willing to not tell the truth. And if you truly are going to open yourself up to power with people, you'll try to stick with truth telling.
So transparency.
Yeah.
And truth
Or
telling.
acknowledging reality rather than always making a pitch or, making yourself look better. What made me think about it was thinking about Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
Because that movement started out basically just speaking a single simple truth.
Yeah.
And
Who started that movement? Black Lives Matter.
I don't know the names of the people, but it unleashed all kinds of power. I mean, there were people who were energized by just starting to say the truth.
Yeah.
And there were people who couldn't bear the truth telling.
Yeah.
And tried to crack down on that simple message.
Someone said, as we were doing our truth telling in the training, we talked a lot about anger, right? And someone said, your anger is attractive. Your anger is attractive. I wrote this down, and I think it would attract others too. It's a really interesting.
I've got to go, everybody. Got to get to work. Thank you, Jamie. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, I hope to talk later.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Previous sheet when it was referring to others. If there's a number 2, I think it was referring to others. If there's a deep theological question for me, or I simply don't understand parts of the Bible, I defer to Richard. That's who I defer to.
Was thinking that a good example of what we mean by meek, we talked about it here, is Jesus before Pilate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our understanding is that Jesus had all the power he needed. Of course, Pilate thought he had all the power. So there was, but Jesus chose not to come on as somebody who was more powerful and violent, even though he clearly thought he was.
Mhm.
You know, so.
My favorite Bible passage in the world is Micah 6:8. Act justly, do have mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. I don't know if the correlation between meekness and walking humbly, if those two are correlated. I haven't quite figured that out. Maybe.
My translation says humble in the place of meek and but the other two, so it could be.
Fun to-
I think the contrast you made between what meek is used preached at and what the background of it really is, I mean, it's linguistic. It's the fact that that word meek, you know, the fact that we would try to say, well, what's another word, and use humble, which really doesn't change. I mean, you can be humble out of weakness, you can be humble out of power. It's not, you know, I don't know of a word that translates it accurately to have that concept of training behind it, you know, that you've got the strength, you've got the power, but it has been, you have been trained to use it in a positive way, or in a productive way.
Yeah, this was the this was the Norse of the word. And the Norse, Old Norse just says gentle.
Yeah.
Right? But the Greek origin is the one that's strength under control. So,
Well, so many of our human cultures and cultural values just badmouth gentleness and what its power really is. I mean, look at the way we treat people. Look at the way we raise children. Human beings just often prefer to have that bombastic, I am in charge, you will, because they emotionally, for that moment, they feel powerful. Actually, they're losing power with every demonstration like that. The real power is gently building, gently communicating.
I saw two cartoons yesterday with my brother. So I have an older brother who's 45, and he has a traumatic brain injury. And one of the things he loves to do with me is watch cartoons. And so we were watching cartoons, and one of them was Haley's on It. And so she is part of this fashion show, and she doesn't want to be a part of it. She's totally not a fashion girl. But they have her put on this black leather jacket, and all of a sudden her persona changes, and she feels like a bad girl, and she's just like,
she's empowered, right?
she's empowered, and she just kind of just tells everybody off, but she just feels great. She's like, it's this jacket, I just don't ever want to take it off because I feel so great, and she's confident, and whatever, but she gets so confident that kind of all these other people who feel like no one ever notices them, they like it, but they've decided they're the kind of stagehands and whatever to this fashion show, and they've decided they're going to ruin the whole fashion show. They're going to place some ink in an ink bomb in one of the hats, and it's going to go off, and they're going to blow the whole show. So she realizes they're going to do this, and so she makes sure to take the jacket off and make it all right, but she said it's not okay to just go blow everything because you don't feel like you're getting things the way that you want to get them, and but the other cartoon I saw was the best. It was a kid a kid, literally a kid goat going to school for the first time. I can't remember which cartoon. Oh, it was Kip, I think. And the kid goat is going to school. That every 300 years, the kids on the wall of goats let one goat go to school and decide if it wants to become an individual and go to school with all the other animals, right? And so, but they have like a seeing eye. You know, they flip back their eyes and they go into like a Om state, and they can see through each other's eyes, and they can all think alike. And so when they have a hive mindset, and so when they all think alike, then they all do the same thing, right? And so the goat is at school, and supposedly they're not going to check in on the goat. They're not going to check in on the goat. They're not going to, but all through the day they're checking in on the goat, and so the goat never does things for itself. And so Kip figures out that if you put a tin foil on the goat's head, then the goat is interfered with the thing, and so it can pick whatever it wants to. And so they're like, oh great, it's gonna be an individual, and it's gonna think for itself, and it's not gonna do what all the other goats want to do. But the goat is sitting there and it's watching all the other animals, and it realizes that they all have a hive mindset too. They all want to eat the same thing, they all want to act the same, they all want to work at the same thing. And so finally it says, I'm not going back to the wall, and Kip says, and I'm not going back to school either. Nope. Everybody's doing the same thing. I'm gonna go be like a jet propulsion whatever, astronaut, something around there. But it's just really funny because it shows the attitudes of being the what you were saying, Jeannie, but it was in cartoon form.
How about the opposite or antonym of power over is surrender? When you have power over someone, the act of surrendering.
Well, there is tension in this paradigm that I'm showing. There's a tension between the power over and the power with. In power with, there is some surrender because you are surrendering your desire to be over the other, but you're not totally surrendering. You don't lose yourself. You're working with the other person. You're together,
Yeah.
You're collaborating. There is some surrender. You're right, but there's not total. If there were total surrender, then you would be lost. And if you were totally surrendered, then you would be right back in that power over. You would just be under that power over.
Right.
That's what that would be. So I want to be mindful of the time. It is 12:13. And so I think, can we go into joys and concerns?